the clouds, so that's good. As we always do, I will call for a few moments of silence. I shall say some words in Old Norse and English. Light a candle. This won't go on for more than a minute, and we shall proceed. I shall be saying these to the north. Jag spikar alla helga kindir, mer jag minni, möge hända alla. Helt kvöld tog helt kvöld sinir, helt natt tog nyf. Då röjde magom lite saker sinir och gav ett sitt runt om sikker. Alle eise för ausen i hälsa en fånget och fold. Maulig man vet givet också mer än tving, och likeness and the midden level. Brandy brenn und bruniner, funny kvekis da funna, mother of money versa of molecules until dalska after. Hail evening, and the sons of evening, hail night and her daughter. With unangry eyes, may you look down upon us and grant the ceasing victory. Hail the gods, hail the goddesses, hail the bountiful earth. Words and wisdom grant us and heal us hands while we live. Flame is quickened by flame. A man from another man may become wiser, but from conceit may remain ignorant. Blessed gods of our peoples and lands, may we spend this time together in friendship with you and with each other and use it to the common good with profit and with pleasure. Hail Odin.
Hail Odin.
Welcome, Askr. Welcome, everyone. Apologies. Let's get on with the event. Askr, the floor is yours. I don't know how many people have read Polemos, which has only recently come out. I have, but it only recently. It only recently arrived, so probably most people haven't. So, sir, yeah, please speak.
Thank you. Greetings for all from West Siberia. Here is 1.5 hours after midnight, and I'm glad to welcome all again. First of all, I want to thank State for inviting me to the stream to talk about pagan traditionalism and my book Polemos. And secondly, I want to apologize for my not perfect English language, but I hope the main points of my speech will be clear and understandable for the audience. For this, I prepared a brief speech, and I will look time by time to check my time and thesis. So, there is the first volume of my book Polemos. It is in 2 bands in Russia, and you can see the perfect picture of Perseus, a bronze statue made by Benvenuto Cellini, now located in Florence in Italy. And if we look on Russian release, we don't see this picture. And this is one interesting fact. In Russia, we have silence censorship provided by Orthodox Church. And they have a special committee which checked all esoteric, pagan, and so on books. And my publisher gave me advice to not put Perseus on the cover of Russian book to avoid odd questions about promoting violence using his figure with sword and head in his hands. So this is this funny fact about release, and only in English the original idea of using this photo and this picture will be done. So and that's how the second volume in Russia looks. It's a little bigger than the first one, and this band, the second band, mostly dedicated to the different and entangled relationships between paganism and Abrahamic religions. Questions of metaphysics of sex, of course, including the frontal critique of postmodern feminism inside and outside modern paganism. And I also discuss different political theories affiliated with paganism today, all political spectrum, without some interesting facts from Russian Rodnovery in late Soviet period and modern and worldwide too. Mostly briefly, but with some fundamental points. Finally, the ending chapter of the second band dedicated to the multidimensional theme of right and left-hand path among main Indo-European traditions. As the audience may know, I am deeply interested in developing the original Germanic left-hand path without modern occultism, infiltrations, and mostly based on Heidegger and authentic hermeneutics of the German Scandinavian mythology and figure of God Odin. So, back to the Polemos book and Pagan Traditionalism. When I have begun working of the book in 2014, in the December of 2013, the last days of 2013, I found myself looking at paganism in the next situation. I discovered that modern paganism in Russia and in Europe, in some places in America and India, for example, all of them have two directions, which can also be considered as two stages of its formations in our days. In places where we have so-called pagan revival or pagan reconstruction. The first direction, and in some sense the chronological stage, in the collection, revival, restoration, and reconstruction of pagan heritage. That is, in this direction, the reenactment, folklore, ethnographic, archaeological, and restoration components prevail. We are talking about the revival of forms of paganism, rituals, the collection of information about gods, traditions, glorifications, superstitions, architecture, embroidery, graphic culture, everyday life practices, history, and everything relating to these two information and data scripted by researchers, by Christian missionaries, and so on. Reconstruction, with small device to underline the re, another one, action. Reconstruction also adjoins this. That is the combination of well-known pagan heritage and the process of filling of gaps in it with the help of creativity or with help of translation of similar elements from the language of one tradition to the language of another. This is very, very, very clearly seen in the structure of Russian Rodnovery, of Russian native faith, when we have a lot of things translated from Vedic or from Hindu culture into the ground of Russian paganism. Sometimes they translated directly, and sometimes they translated in deeply level, on the level of concepts or level of ideas, not on the level of words of adaptation or transliteration of terms from Hindu Russian to Slavic languages. Although, of course, this process always has its errors, its mistakes. And this intensive process, which began in the 18th century and continued and rise to the peak in the 20th and 21st centuries, transition from Hindu, from Orient tradition to the West, and some kind of adaptation or syncretism between traditions. And this make errors or mistakes in understanding. And to date, the reenactment and restoration aspects of paganism has passed a high quality Rubicon. All further archaeological discoveries or quantitative deepening and expansion of folklore and ethnographic data will add to paganism only certain touches to the main picture. Although I do not exclude the possibility that some twists or turns are possible, but they will rather be brighter and more unexpected, but still the same touches. Or if some discovery appears and bring us new information, it will be on the same level of forms. And the critical mass of the pagan heritage, both in Europe and in Russia, is already open and comprehended, supplemented, and accessible to pagans, and mostly transferred into practice. And there is a second direction. And the second chronological stage is associated with philosophical paganism. Not so much with the material and folklore heritage as with theology and metaphysics. Attempts to move from myth to philosophy through growth or denial. As we know, the logos can deny the mythos ground or relate to them with more respect in some forms. So I made earlier, but the traditionalists and their philosophy turned out to be the most adequate, intellectual, and close to the spirit of paganism. As I mentioned in another book in Russia, traditionalism as philosophy and methodology is most adequate to work with logos and mythos in one and another hand, without denial, but with respect and understanding the mythos as ground and logos as a plant or as a flower rooted in this ground and depend on this ground too. But back to traditionalism. Here is the first place is given without reservation to Julius Evola, Italian master of traditionalism, who openly sided with manifestationism position and took a principled position regarding creationism. Chronologically, this is the 20th century with all its shock and tragedies. And at that time, the process of exoteric reconstruction was already confidently carried out, to which Evola even wrote a commentary in the form of warning against the delusions of neo-pagans. His famous article dedicated to wrong ways of pagan revival in mid 20th century Europe, based on materialism, blind nature worship, and so on. It's very relevant critics. And in the second half of the century, an increase in the number of thinkers who share that we call today pagan traditionalism. But they exist in some isolation from the first group, from the regular pagans or neo-pagans who practice it in forest, on the fields, in the nature in whole, who were practices, not so much theorists or philosophers, but practice and build organization. And that is reconstructive paganism and pagan philosophy intersect extremely rarely and situationally, spontaneously. Therefore, we say that these two directions exist in the same time, but mostly side by side and with rare cross or working together. But at the same time, today, the restoration of paganism has already reached its ceiling. Paganism has begun to choke on reconstruction in accentuation on materialism and historical authenticity, also in material things too. The accuracy of tailoring things has become more important than their esoteric essence. On the one hand, this situation, and on the other hand, in all its glory, the beginning of blooming and commercialization of paganism. That is the transformation of its symbols into trade brands, as we know in 2019, in the last year, in Europe, there was a situation when term paganism was associated with trademark, and this was a discussion we also know in Russia about it. Some metal band registered the word sacred words as a trademark or part of trademark lozung. So this is sadly and most in some part funny fact, but is also a sign of time. All this means that pagans, both in Russia and Europe, simply do not know what to do with their paganism in secular society. That is the level of external reconstruction and mysticism, sacred experience in the course of ceremonies, holidays, rites, of course, has value and generates a sense of belonging to group, belonging to some religion, confession, spiritual stream. But nevertheless, paganism today is like a log cabin in the woods, which stands with open gates and windows, or without any gates and windows, and the intersection of the four winds or all winds from all over the world. That which goes beyond reconstruction and ritual in chaotic, not meaningful, not understood as something that should be paid close attention to. In this log cabin of paganism, the winds carry into heaps of garbage and destroy the cabin itself. The paganism as log cabin located in forest suffers from without borders, without some methods can protect them from infiltrators of modernity and postmodernity, and from some new age infiltrators too. Therefore, the paganism of the first stage or direction is today in stagnation. There is no deep reflection, metaphysical understanding of what is what. One of my main thoughts, one of the most important tasks what I and my comrades trying to solve, it's to return to paganism a fundamental voice and entrust to paganism the solution of deep questions of being, of existence, and destinies of people, of ethnoses. Philosophy originated in ancient Greece and ancient India as a completely pagan thought. If we imagine the whole history as a watch dial when all historical time of all peoples, they were pagan. All history were pagan. And only the last 20-30 minutes before midnight did Abrahamism and atheism appears. The main thing for us is to pass the midnight point authentically as pagans in the center of our own identity. The principles and ideas laid down in my books and in Polemos and others were applied to Russian native faith on Russian ground, to Russian-speaking and English-speaking followers of the Asatru in Europe and the USA, to the situation of the Kalash people in Pakistan, for whom I wrote a small text of recommendations. And I'm sure that these ideas have a huge potential that can be used by pagans anywhere in the world, adopting some provisions to their realities. And I'm especially glad that there are other authors, other activists and figures in this direction of thought with whom we are on the way and develop different approaches to different traditions according to my main major statements declared in Polemos, in another books, and in books from another respectful authors. We base it on two, like Alain de Benoist, Julius Evola, and more and more and more. And that's my short speech, and I think you are welcome to discuss and question. I'll try to answer as best as I can.
Askr, many thanks. Thanks for being patient with the technical problems. I have several questions, but maybe some of you here have to leave earlier. So does anyone have any questions who has to leave and really needs to make a point early? If not, yes, Frank. Yeah, please, Frank, go ahead, Father Frank.
Well, I enjoyed your talk. I was especially interested in your reference to Julius Evola. Now, when I was a young man, as young as you are, in Rome, I had the pleasure of being acquainted personally with Julius Evola. And I actually written a book available online about my memories of Julius Evola. Emphasize especially his interest and personal involvement in the Sufi tradition, which is part of an Abrahamic religion, but it is an esoteric tradition. However, the question I wanted to ask you is maybe some more sort of specific. Now, I have here the Italian version of Mask and face of contemporary spiritualism, by which Evola, of course, didn't mean spirituality, but he meant some practices championed by Theosophists, Madame Blavatsky, and company, and he was very critical of that. However, there is in this book an interesting chapter which I find too dramatic, but there is an interesting chapter on Satanism. Now, it's a bit of a hodgepodge, and it mentions various elements of Satanism, particularly the case of Aleister Crowley, who was an English Satanist and also a spy, a secret agent. Well, there is a lot to say there. But anyway, I would like to comment, if you don't mind, to comment on the Satanist strand in some forms of paganism or neo-paganism. Well, I'll leave it at that.
Okay, thanks. Very good question. I know Evola's ideas declared in this book. This book also was published in Russian language in the last year, and I think all major Julius Evola's books already published in Russian language, and available for us. And I also follow and share his ideas about modern spirituality. And in preface to the English Polemos by Richard Radgley, he also speaks about Evola, about Aleister Crowley. I also know 2 books about his life, and the question you asked me, I talk about it and I write about it in second band of Polemos in the chapter of the left-hand path. Of course, it's developed in Europe in the light of Crowley's work, but I hardly try to avoid all influences of Crowley and his followers in Russia or all around the world on paganism and my own view too. I cannot, I consider them as something deeply wrong and anti-traditionalistic. But in some transgressive insights, transgressive in meaning of French writer, sociologist Georges Bataille, in this light, of course, they may be interesting, but very accurate and remembering what Julius Evola talked about it, writes about it, and most of the core of Aleister Crowley's transgressive path, he took from Tantra, or something called Julius Evola have an article, The Left-Hand Path and the Dionysus. So we can find some parts from Crowley's system in ancient Greece, in cult of Dionysus, and from Tantras too. So why we should do references to Crowley if we can do references to directly to Tantra, to Vamachara, to Akhori teachings and radical left-hand path group from India, described in many books, which also available, and to some European traditions from the past. So, and Satanism, if we use this word according to paganism, we, in the background, we working together with Christian language, with Christian paradigm of dividing world to Satan and divine part. We using their language, and their language affect our thinking. So we should avoid Christianity and Satanism both, because they all the same one teaching and things. And if we want to construct or find or develop any so-called grim or transgressive dark left-hand path, we can work with only with pagan traditions all around the world, where we can find some aspects of this way, without modern, or I'm sorry, without classical European occultism from the Renaissance or the last 2-3 centuries ago. We can avoid all this structure. And we see that modern European, Crowleyan or not, left-hand path is something deeply complement with some modern left liberal political ideas and traditional left-hand path from Hindu, from some Greece cults. It's a different thing, and I'm glad that the left-hand path in Slavic Ragnaveri, Slavic native faith, for example, developed by Ilya Cherkasov or Volkh Velislav, Godi Velislav, in many books. It is a very different teaching different from European, but based on the same texts and the same authors, and Crowley too. I think I'm finished the answer.
Oh, thanks. That's a good point. I'd like to ask about tradition, and I think it's very good that Frank is here, because I contacted him earlier asking him about Julius Evola, so that will become more understandable when I explain the question. I think the gods are the source of meaning. They are what make our profound experiences of joy or of sorrow profound experiences. On a certain level, they uphold the way we experience reality. So although they might be deeply mysterious, I don't see them as remote. And in relation to tradition, I mean, is it your view that the gods are actually remote from present day personal experience, so that the only way we're able to approach them is by some sort of chain, some initiatory chain that reaches back to someone in the past who had a very vivid sense of the reality of the gods, if we ourselves don't? And in relation to Julius Evola, was his sort of search for tradition, his obsession with that, was that due maybe to the fact that he didn't have any strong sense of sacrality of deity in his life? I was asking Frank whether he was someone who prayed, whether he had a religious practice, and I don't know that he did. So maybe that's an element with tradition, people that want some experience that they're not getting. I don't know, but perhaps you could comment on that.
If I understand your question correct, you're asking about approaching to the gods by Julius Evola's position. The I mean, traditionalist without tradition is a famous definition about him. Yes, I'm right.
Yes, I think, yeah, the idea of is tradition mainly necessary for those that don't have a practice that brings them into contact with sacrality?
As Julius Evola wrote in his last book, Ride the Tiger, if some parts or some forms of tradition became not fire but became ashes, we can throw it. We can do not carry it on and further and throw it and follow without without helping, without their helping. We stand title from his another book, Man Among the Ruins. We stand from among the ruins of tradition, of forms of structures of them, and it is an interesting situation. Of course he's right but for his own, it's described in books which explore ancient Roman religion. For ancient Romans, the core or the main way to express sacrality was action, and mostly political action. Action for the state, for the republic, for the empire. Anyway, public political action. It was the first or main way to express sacrality. In some way, it's something like system of public rights.
If there's a word in Russian, I'm sure Vladimir would translate if that would.
Oh, okay. And Julius Evola in his life performs this this archetype, this way. He was a public politician. He was a public speaker, writer, teacher for the youth or for the Mussolini's state, for example. And by himself, he didn't call himself as an ancient Rome god's follower or something like that. He studied a lot of traditions, and it's okay to study different traditions, to write books about, but he didn't call himself as Roman pagan, for example, but he behaved and he acted in his life like ancient Roman aristocratic man. So we can consider Julius Evola like a Roman pagan, classical Roman pagan, but in modern times of 20th century. And we don't need his own word about it if we see he behave his self in this way, absolutely correctly to the ancient Roman republic or empire. If we move him by machine of time back to the times, he would be on his own place. But he lived in modern times, so it is affect his situation. And the last books, Man Among the Ruins and Ride the Tiger, I think he wrote and talked all what he wanted about it. And yes, some forms of tradition died or dying in our eyes today. We see how it's going, but it is not a place to compromise with modernity. Some people can found it, or okay, tradition forms dying, so we can compromise with modernity. But Julius Evola and I and another authors, we think it is not a place to compromise, but it is a place to find another way. And this way is harder because it's a way without teachers, way without people who tell us where to go, how to behave. It is the strange situation in the tradition, but it is a regular situation in traditionalism. So can we approach the gods today? Yes, we can. And Julius Evola also develops the conception of self-initiation with golden chain by one ring, and in bottom you person, a man, and individual man, and the top of the ring is the divine nature. So you don't need the horizontal chain of tradition from priests, from aristocratics, from monks, or whatever. You don't need this horizontal line. René Guénon, he stands on for this line. His statement was this horizontal line of tradition is very important. Julius Evola said, no, it is not important. Important only one ring of this chain, of this golden chain. It's ring where you in the bottom and divine nature, or higher absolute reality, or higher level of being, in his words, and you can reach this directly. It's a René Guénon stands and use Vedanta, but Julius Evola use and maybe practice Tantra. So this different points of view express different bases on taken from the Hindu traditions. So yes, we can do it, we can reach it, but it is hardly way by default, by definition.
Yeah, thank you. Frank, I think you wanted to come in on something?
Yes, I think an important thing to understand vis-a-vis Julius Evola, that he was also a philosopher. A philosopher, maybe not so in the academic, modern academic sense, whereby he's a professor who is pontificating to students in a hall and who gets his philosophy from books. I'm reminded of Schopenhauer, who said, the real philosopher takes his knowledge from life, the bogus philosopher takes it from books. Now, the point here I want to make is that Evola, thanks to his philosophical approach, which was combined with living like a philosopher. For example, he was very more than interested, interest is the wrong word, is very much into Plotinus, into Neoplatonism. And he was acquainted with ecstasy. And an important aspect of the Neoplatonic tradition, as well as other traditions, is that it is not so much form or ritual prayer, which leads you to contact with the transcendent, the divine, but it is ecstasy. You have a particular entry into the transcendent, which is via the ecstatic approach. Now, that is why the so-called ways of liberation, which are Eastern more than Western, like Zen, like yoga, like Tantra, was very important to Evola. And was not only an upholder of this tradition, but was personally acquainted. Our speaker made reference to Tantra. Evola had personally experienced Tantra. When I decided off my own bat to delve into Tantra, and I told him, he was very angry, because he told me that you should not have done it, it's very dangerous, because his own experience had not been very positive, because transgressing elements. But Sartre is an important aspect to understand about Ebola. Was also a minor popularizer of Eastern religions called Alan Watts, whom I also knew, and he wrote in his book, The Way of Zen, about the ways of liberation, which are completely different from Western approaches, are more intellectual based already from books. They're not like the ancient philosophers who would actually, their philosophy was rooted in their own life. But there is one point about which I want to disagree with Askr, because he said Ebola was like an ancient Roman religion. Now, can't remember his exact words. Ebola, certainly his character was like an ancient Roman of a certain understanding of what Romanitas, what the spirit of Rome was. But certainly had no, if one knows anything about the ancient Roman religion, it was a matter of ritualism, of institutional practices, of, nobody's going to tell me Julius Caesar as Pontifex Maximus had a certain interest in the spirituality of a Roman religion. He was only interested in the job and the perks which the job gave to him. No, I know that Ebola wrote about Julius Caesar, sidereal, is the worst sidereal nature which is more than human. But I think that's also pitching it very high. I mean, Julius Caesar was basically a very sharp politician, a very sharp idea what he wanted to do in a great warrior as well. Anyway, that's only a minor rectification I wanted to put in. For the rest, our speaker gave us some interesting contribution.
Okay, so thanks very much. Michael in London, I know you're someone who studied Roman religion very much. I don't know whether you would have any point. If not, I'll ask Louise, who did have a question. But you'd like to, yeah.
I'll say something. Unfortunately, I came in late, so I missed the first part of your talk. And I really came in kind of when you were talking about paganism choking on reconstruction. And so I wasn't quite sure where you were going with that. I understand that you feel that paganism suffers from a lack of boundaries against modernity, post-modernity, New Age. I could go with that. On the Aleister Crowley thing, I mean, he's very popular among certain circles in London, and still is. I think with Crowley, you can only really approach him with a large sense of humor. But the Satanism aspect, it's not only an inversion of Christianity, it's probably also as much the worship of the Egyptian god Set and the kind of philosophical anarchism of Mikhail Bakunin. So I think that all has to be taken on board. I like really a lot of what you were saying, and I think the whole question of tradition, I think tradition it's maybe not important, but it's helpful to the degree that we can recapture elements from it, but we can't be constricted by that because there's too much that we don't know. And also tradition has to change. If it doesn't evolve as we evolve and change, then it is your ashes that you referred to. It doesn't become useful. But I think as long as we can do our research into tradition, and this is really getting to Stead's finding the gods as living present realities. There are ways to do that, and I don't think we need priests. We don't need somebody telling us how to do it. We have to figure that out individually for ourselves, but they're there. And if we acknowledge them and try to find out what information we can from the past about them, then they become organic, real presences for us to work with, commune with, and to benefit by. So I think that's kind of what you were saying as far as tradition being something more open, more flexible. And if I have that right, I welcome that.
Thanks.
Let me
Can I
just
answer,
let me
please?
just butt in. I found you very poetic in things like a flower rooted in now sounded so well what we're into.
A logos is the flower rooted in the ground.
But I like you
ethos.
finding words to say something. Good for you.
Answering this shortly speech, yes, we all no doubt we live in modern times, and we cannot avoid the reality around us. And American philosopher and writer Colin Cleary, in one of his books, I wrote two prefaces to his books in Russian. He describes the situation of North American Indians when in the times of frontier, when Americans conquer the middle of South America and modern USA, they killed all bisons, all sacred animals of local tribes, and these animals was the heart, the core of tribes' religion. They not just killed the livestock, they killed the tradition. And in this situation, local tribes found themselves without any sacred around them, and they find the another way. They look inside them, not only ecstasis, standing outside of us, ecstatical way, but according to American religious scholar Mircea Eliade, entasm. When we looking inside and going inside is two. It's a mirror of ecstasis, ecstatical ways, ecstatical rise, and entasis, staying inside, step outside and step inside us. It is another, but the equal way to found the new origin, not new form, not to adapting tradition to the secular society. And of course, every right-hand path traditionalist want to live in world of tradition, not for themselves, but for all people in West world or all people all around the world. It's not an individualistic desire to touch the sacred. So Indian tribes looks inside themselves, and in these times originated the cult of sacred drink made by local plants, the peyote, and they found another way to express the sacrality based not on sacred animal which were killed, but the sacred plant, and they developed the whole system based on this sacred drink. So if we're talking about approaching to the gods, approaching to the sacred, to the tradition, we can also combine ecstatical and stasis and statical ways to search new origins of traditions. And after we find a region, we find the ground, we can spread the seeds or waiting when new forms grown up. resume, first of all, find to the new original if it needed. But and secondly, forms comes after. And if we first of all trying to make forms, to invent forms, we may lose the core, and our construction will fall after we die, after our great teacher died, as we know many examples of when the rule person died and whole organization falls. So we should not repeat this experience, I think.
Right, thank you. If I may, I'd like to try and give some voice to as many people as possible. Louise, would you like to give your question to slightly sort of shift the focus a bit? Yeah, you unmute yourself, please, Louise.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Well, this is all really quite further ahead than I am this evening. I'm
well,
clearly
that's true for all of us. That's a good thing, yeah.
Oh, I mean, it's difficult for me to follow it all, really. But anyway, what I was saying was I was liking to know from where we stood. All the religious traditions have the Kala Yuga, the end times, and all that sort of thing, which is supposed to be about now. So I was just wondering how they feel about that. If they think it's probably following the Indian tradition, I suppose, which did have that thing in it, didn't it? So
it does. I think we've got a few more years till the Kali Yuga finishes. But Askr, please, yeah.
Could you please repeat a little bit louder?
Yeah,
don't hear all.
Louise is asking for your thoughts about the idea of the end times that one finds in many religions, such as Ragnarok and the Kali Yuga, as how they relate to the present that we're living through.
I'm very interested in this question, and of course, in light of German Scandinavian tradition. And I have a whole book dedicated to this theme, as a theme of Ragnarok, of the end of the times, eschatological gnosis of Scandinavian tradition, of God Odin, of myth of Ragnarok, of final battle, Baldur's death, and so on. I also speak about it in Polemos, write about it in Polemos. And one book about German tradition, German philosophy, also based on Heidegger, on linguistic, on mythology studies, about end of times. Of course, I agree we live in these times, but I think we live in the early beginning of Kali Yuga. If it continues 365,000 years, according to some information from Indian sources, so we live only first 5,000. So it will be continuous 360,000 years further. So we can find ourselves in very difficult existential situation. We know about ending of times, we know it comes, but we find ourselves is in early beginnings. So all what we see, or all what we know, all what we read from traditionalists, classical books, it's only entering to this time. And I think it's wrong thinking about Kali Yuga can ends on can ends soon, or maybe on our lifetime, or our grandchildren can see the end of Kali Yuga. No, our far children cannot see the end of Kali Yuga, and they doomed to live in this world for hundreds of thousands years, and it is a rare theme, a rare rare thinkers write or think about the situation. Mostly they tell that Kali Yuga continues, or it's around us. Yes, we know Kali Yuga around us from Hindu sacred text from 1,000 years ago. It's not news, it is old news, nothing original in this information. But the interesting question is how we should, or how it's possible to live in this situation in the next times, in the next years and centuries. And it is a very hard question. Julius Evola writes a couple of books about how we can live or can find a way to live in the future which not belong to us, and and where we cannot take a power back, or bring tradition back to the live in whole. And I also now working on book in Russia dedicated to this theme too. It's one of the themes in my book, and not only it's a really hard question. I cannot shortly describe any possibilities of how we can do it.
Well, I think that's a perfectly good answer. I don't think that, I think some issues are so significant that there isn't necessarily a simple answer, and I think that is good.
I think, sorry, Sid, in Riding the Tiger, Chevaucher la Tigre in French, Julius Evola provides some prescription how to cope with existence through the Kali Yuga. One has to read Riding the Tiger.
Yes, but he, but he makes some mistakes maybe when he discusses about Heidegger or relativism conception of the scientific truth and so on. But mostly it's a very relevant work, of course. And I have an original Italian edition of his work, and I reread Russian release the last month, so special for working on my book.
Yes, well, I mean, I'd rather err with Evola than be right with people who are far below him, but I'll leave that.
Okay, well, that's good. So that's one thing to do, Louise. Maybe have a read of Ride the Tiger, and that will perhaps provoke some thoughts. So,
Stead, may I throw something in there? I really do take slight exception to this idea that the Kali Yuga is just one block existence, that I don't know how many 100,000 years it's supposed to be. It is comparable to the ages, geological ages, for example, the ice ages. There are variations within that, and I think one has to recognize that. I firmly believe we're entering a better period within the Dark Age, that it is before us, and I think it's very important to say that, because otherwise people will be entirely depressed.
Could I just mention, as an upbeat point, Arkaryaji, the gentleman who spoke a few moots ago, who is
totally kind of immersed in the Hindu tradition, says that there are golden ages within the Kali Yuga.
Exactly,
so there is,
exactly. Yeah,
there is something to look forward to. So that is important. Vladimir, I wondered, you know, as obviously you've got some knowledge of the Slavic world, whether you'd like to ask any particular question.
Well, Slavic world, good question. Yes, I personally belong mostly to the Baltic and Scandinavian and German.
So sorry for insulting you or putting you in the wrong box, Vladimir. Sorry.
No. But maybe it would be interesting question to ask. How much do they use exactly the Slavic tradition? Because the Slavic tradition is very close to the German one. In certain way, and to the Baltic one as well, because they have the same historical and anthropological root. So, do you use any Slavic symbolism or any Slavic mysticism, especially just living in Siberia? You have like a wonderful nature and great powers, and probably another question: do you use any shamanistic like technique in your exercises?
Okay, thanks. The supreme shaman of Russia, the head of Russian shamans, lived in the next city by me, and I need just 7 or 9 hours by car to visit him. I don't know him personally, but he's very close to me right now. And of course, Siberia is I live near to border. I live in Western Siberia, but in East Siberia, a lot of different kinds of shamanism exist. Khakasian, Altaic, Tuvinian, mixed with Buddhism, with some Kazakhstan, and so on, and further to the north, to the local people. And of course, Russian paganism, so-called Rodnovery, not only Rodnovery. Now in Russia we have differentiation, the process of developing new streams or new schools of thought of Russian native faith. And of course, I use mostly works by Volk Velislav. One of his books was published by Fall of Man Publishing in 2070s or 2018, and also with my preface where I describe the situation in Russian paganism. So his work available in English, first and only one. And I use mostly his works, and his works developed under the huge influence of European occultism and Hindu left-hand path tradition. He is an author who invented and developed the left-hand path in Russian Rodnovery, the original, fully original school of thought. And of course, I use it and I describe it in my second band of Polemos. And Russian Slavic tradition, of course, I have a lot of friends, and we every day working with Rodnovers, with Slavic pagans on our different projects. I have a lot of comrades who also develop Slavic pagan traditionalism or another ways in paganism fall. And of course, there is a question. I'm not fully agree that German, Scandinavian tradition and Slavic traditions are very close. Of course, we can find a lot of similar things among different traditions. Some vertical hierarchy structure, gods, family of gods, functional structure of society of gods, and so on, described by Dumezil. But I think in the depths, the German tradition, it's a very unique thing because of God Odin, because of his very difficult and controversial sometimes structure of his identity. I cannot find this analog to Odin in Slavic tradition. Of course, we know the god Vel is the god of livestock, the god of wisdom, the god of ways, the god of goddess, of priests, and god of many and other things. He's very close to them. And Wolf Veleslav, he develops the comparing of them and says it is the same figure in the Germanic and Slavic tradition, but I not fully agree with him, because we have a lack of understanding who was the Veles for Slavic folks and for Slavic peoples. And I don't deny this conception, but I want to more more arguments to
establish
to apologize.
the latter. Okay. Well, yeah. Thanks very much. I think we'll think about winding down. I don't know whether Mick, you have any question, or Twyla or Renata?
Not really, because I came in late, so I don't want to talk about something that's already been discussed. So,
okay. Well, yeah, thanks so much for coming. I know that various people have to go. To Twyla, Renata, I mean, if no one has any.
Yeah, well, so I did want to throw in one.
Yeah, Michael. Yeah, go ahead.
I don't want to, because it's a very long subject, but I thought it came up. It was a little bit short, and that, of course, is the difference between paganism and the religions of the book, and paganism being very much associated with nature, and that's for me the attraction of it. The very word pagan, kind of paysan, peasant, pais, country and everything, and heathen coming from Haida, from the German, from the heath. And there probably isn't time because people are tired and so on, but I mean, there seems to be a discussion point there. To what extent, I think you mentioned, Askr, in your talk, something about not blind nature worship. Well, indeed not. Whatever, blind nature worship doesn't sound like a good idea. But I think, on the other hand, we shouldn't lose a sense that there is this identity of nature, which perhaps the religions, so the dominant religions that came later, Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, and I think Alain de Benoit made that point in his book, actually, Comment peut-on être paysan, are dominated by the idea of the desert. They haven't got this natural reference, and therefore, and this is the point I really wanted to get to, their religion tends to be out of this world. I mean, Nietzsche made this point as well, whereas the idea of a pagan is reference to this world. So I'm a little bit uneasy when I heard you say about blind nature worship. I agree with you anyway about the blind. Nature worship, I'm not so sure that's such a bad thing, but we probably haven't got time to go into it in depth. And one second point, I think there's quite a complexity about the rejection or the idea of devil worship and Satanism. Christianity is often identified. First of all, Christianity is a little bit of a contradiction, because it says all these idols didn't exist, and then it identifies them as devils, as though they do exist. I mean, classic, probably most English people know Milton's Paradise Lost, that quite a lot of the devils are old gods from the Phoenicians. I mean, Baal Moloch is the old, of course, the appalling god of child sacrifice and everything, of the Phoenicians, of the Semites, who Milton believed very much existed. Wasn't a fiction at all, and he was a devil, and therefore Satanism often identified rightly or wrongly with old gods. Very, very difficult subject, a very difficult subject. But I think those 2 points that one should keep in mind, and perhaps, in my opinion, if I may say so, you could have highlighted a little bit more. No way that you could have gone into it in depth. Would be here all night, I think. But I just want to throw those things.
Maybe I misuse the word blind. I mean, the regular pagans, of course, and pagans from early 20th century, they repeat some actions. They pray to the nature on the not without knowing of the depths. They follow the simply rules, simply rites, and they were blindly, not blind nature. Nature is our mother in our kind, the Mother Earth and the Sky Father, for example. Of course, it is belongs to this world, and early pagans have a lack of understanding of the depths, and this is a point of critics providing by Julius Evola and by me too. So maybe this misuse. And yes, I agree about Satanism, about old gods became new demons, and the word demon originated from Greek daimon. It's inner god. Of course, it's you absolutely correct in this way. The situation is more complicated.
Perhaps I could just say something, Michael. The structure of paganism is most resemblant to nature in that, as a religion, as opposed to the Abrahamic religions, it has no beginning. It's kind of coextensive with the world, has no beginning, and it has no end. And it throws out roots that lead to new trees coming off. And lastly, it has male and female in it. It has gods and it has goddesses, as does the natural world. And the Abrahamic faiths don't so much. You know, they really don't. So that is it is a very, its structure is like a natural entity. Anyway, I think that is
quite well put. That yes.
I think maybe we should Twyla, you don't have anything to say before? I know I'm all right. Yeah.
One thing I would ask, Ed.
Go ahead, please.
I've been reading the book, and I thought it was an excellent critique of postmodernism. But would you think that the rhizomatic spread of postmodernism in the Atlanticist countries it's just there's just such a state of decay that nothing's gonna, we just can't get anything together here in terms of anything constructive.
Could you please repeat this bad connection?
Sorry. Yes, I was reading a book about the rhizomatic spread of postmodernism. Obviously, in the Atlanticist countries, such as Great Britain, there's been such degeneration of everything traditional that I was just wondering if you thought there was any hope for Western Europe, but specifically Great Britain and America and places like that.
Not only in United Kingdom or United States, in Russia we have the same situation, and in Europe I was in Germany, I was in Greece, I was in Italy, and I see the same bad situation in decline of everything, I think. And there is several or few suggestions how to solve the situation or how to revive or restore or save what we have. And today, till and to today, I think one of the most interesting is the idea of, it's a very rare and radical idea declared by Finnish thinker and ornithologist and fisherman Karla Pentilin-Kola, and his ideology comrade from USA, Theodore Kaczynski. But they are very different, and none of them was a traditionalist. So their ideas need to be revived from the point of traditionalism, and this is what I'm working now. So their idea.
No, I was going to say both of those authors specifically reject technology.
Yes,
and do you think that?
Yes, the one of the possible ways, and I think it's very logically argumented way, it's to totally revive and reject modern technology, industrial, post-industrial, virtuality, high-tech, IT, society, and economically based society. And now I'm working on book about it, revive it from the right, so-called, and from the traditional position. And I hope I also translate some quotes, some short parts from the book. And I think their ideas, but view it from our point of view, review it and rethink it, and maybe correct it from our position, may be the one of the sad, or it is not a funny, happy, or sunny way to solve the problem. It is a hard way to solve the problem. And it's hard way, and Linkola described it very clear and fair for themselves too. So I think the times of Kali Yuga calls for the hard salvation, and if we read some if we read text from dedicated to goddess Kali, goddess Durga, from Shaktism school of thought and practice, we know that Kali appears and kill and destroy the countless masses of demons, of so-called asuras, or enslaved people, and so on. So rides the tiger, or Kali way in Kali Yuga, based on this figure, on this image, is to purification, full purification.
Well, maybe that's a suitably climacteric and sort of somber image to leave on it. So thanks for the question. I will, as we do, I'll just close it formally.
Martugur och miskunnsamma aiser att kvälldiska daglefe kono e prende maki runde moje gevine ise ivekemer bolle drukkite och att not skal kvöldglefa. Blessed gods of our peoples and lands, at evening shall one praise the day, and at night shall one praise the evening.
We offer thanks for what we've profited by and for what we found pleasure in this evening. Sigur either, sigur os, either, either os. Today is also Krishna Yan Mastami, the author of the Bhagavad Gita, was, tradition says, born 5,247 years ago at midnight. So I thought we would end by 3 very short verses, first in an Old Norse translation, then in English. En hin sem finner unas I saule, fognet I saule, og fud neigjur I saule, a ekkert eftir ógert. Engil hluti I vörld binda han, hvorki unin verk ne ununin, og áhugamál hans eru ekki komin óþrum ferum. Bin því jafnan skildu veg þín án hugsunar árangur. Sá sem vinur laþur verkomnum, odlast vissulega æstu fullkomnum. But the man who has found the joy of the Spirit, and in the Spirit has satisfaction, who in the Spirit has found his peace, that man is beyond the law of action and reaction. He is beyond what is done and what is not done. And in all his works, he is beyond any dependency. In liberty from the bonds of attachment, do thou the work to be done. Do it out of duty, for the man whose work is thuswise pure attains indeed the supreme. From Vantu Vishwam Aryam, Gura Gurka Varilina Skulum, let us make the world noble. Hail, Odin. Thank you, Askr, very much for your patience. Thank you, Michael, Mick, Vladimir, Michael in London, and Twyla for the rather rough beginning of it with the technical issue. Thanks everyone for persevering and asking such good questions and being a good audience. Wonderful. Well, I look forward to the next volume following Polemos, which is an excellent book. You know, it's not an easy book, but it's a very valuable read. So yes, I wish you well with your work as an author, and I hope we'll keep in touch and meet again in some form or other. Thank you. All right.
Thank you for this meeting. I'm very glad to talk with people around the world and answer really good questions. Thanks a lot for all of you, and I hope we continue dialogues on other platforms too.
Absolutely, thank you. All right, I'll say good night to everyone, and have a good evening. Bye bye. Thank you very much. Bye bye. Bye bye. Bye bye.